Hi, everyone, and welcome into the Comics Lair for our look at the X-Man Storm, Orphan, X-Man, and Queen. The Comics Lair is sponsored by Heroes Aren't Hard to Find and Heroes Convention. I'm your host, Nancy Northcott. And if you're a regular here, you know that we always start with the panelists introducing themselves and telling us a little bit about themselves. And so let's start with that. Len, will you go first?
Len Berry here. I write science fiction. I write dark fantasy. I have a wonderful mascot friend named Akito the Red Panda who coaches me on doing better. Okay, he agrees today. I've been doing a few other little side things recently, a couple of short stories back out into the world, some coloring books on the side. My main things I have out are a dystopian novel, Vitamin F, and a dark fantasy novel inspired by Dark Souls and similar games called Scars of Shadow.
Okay, Sumiko?
Oh, hi, my name is Sumiko Saulsen. I am an Afro-surrealist and horror author, and I am also a Bram Stoker-nominated horror poet, and I also write dark fantasy and some science fiction. I love Storm, and I also love Black Panther, which we all know has Storm in it, in the comics at least. And I have a little cat named Marla.
Okay, Marisa?
Hi, I'm Marisa Wolf. I write science fiction and fantasy as well. I am obsessed with Storm. She's my favorite X-woman, X-person. And any good thief to goddess story, I'm in. So excited to talk about her tonight.
Okay, Doc?
I'm Doc Coleman, and I write steampunk comedy adventure. And I've been a long time fan of the comics, and the X-Men has been one of my favorite groups. And of course, Storm is always featured prominently.
Jenny?
Hi, I'm Gini Koch. I write the Alien Catherine Kitty Cat series for Daw Books. I also write under a variety of other pen names in all lengths and genres. And in the Alien series, particularly, Kitty, my heroine, is a gigantic comics geek girl because it is Write What You Know. And I am a huge X-Men fan. So happy with you.
And those of you who are here often know that I write historical fantasy, several different kinds of romance, and science fiction. I've been reading comic books since I was about 8 years old, and I discovered the X-Men late. I was in college and discovered them with Giant Size X-Men #1 and the run that started there, which I think many people now consider a classic. But I think Storm is very cool. I personally would like to be able to shoot lightning. But, I don't think that's ever going to happen. So we'll go and let everybody tell us how you discovered Storm. What was your first exposure to the character and what draws you to her? Sumiko, will you start?
Yeah, so when I was 15, I discovered the New Mutants comics, which were actually new. They were just coming out then. And it made me feel really fascinated with the whole mutant universe. So I started picking up all of them. And this was, I'm 55. So this was 40 years ago. I actually started picking up the X-Men. And at that time, the storyline was one where Storm had actually gone through a time loop and turned into a teenager. Because she was a teen, and yes, this is cool, wearing a mohawk, 80s punk rock Storm. So that was my first introduction to Storm. And as a person who was a teen at the time, I very much, and because I'm African American, very much related to this very, very, very cool character. So since I was introduced to the teenage Storm, I didn't get to know the grown-up Storm until later.
Okay, Marisa?
Yeah, I'm a second generation nerd. My dad is a big old nerd and was taking me to comic book stores when I was young. And when I was like 10-ish, I think, I was allowed to touch comics with my grubby child hands. And we had a comic book store open in our town. So I started going, and my dad was very much a DC comic book reader, so I had to read Marvel. Mostly, I think it was his secret plan, so we had all of the comic books, but he could say it was my fault. But it worked, and X-Men was my jam. He kept trying to get me into Fantastic Four, and they were fine, but X-Men had Storm and Kitty Pryde and Rogue, and that was it. I was sold. And I think because I started reading it when there were like 8 different titles. So there was like Uncanny, there was X-Men, X-Force, 3 others. Generation X, I think, was then Excalibur, which I loved. So I was buying back issues whenever they were affordable and available. And I found when Storm took over the Morlocks, and I was like, oh, it was very cool. She just has such a cool, rich backstory. So I was always buying any issue that had her on the cover because I was like, this is gonna be cool. I'm gonna find out something. Let's go to Cairo. I don't know. Going to Wakanda. Find out.
Doc?
So I rediscovered comic books when I was in college, and after getting back into them, I went to a local comic book store where somebody had recently dumped off like the first 50 episodes of the New Mutants, and I started picking up those. And of course, at that time, they had the X-Men and the New Mutants at Xavier's mansion together, so that quickly spread into collecting the X-Men as well. But that was also part of the time when you start off with Storm being one of the instructors and being powered, and then you had the whole thing with the Morlocks and the Marauders, and then Storm losing her powers and then her taking over the Morlocks, and just found her to be an absolutely fascinating character. That you had one character that embraced so many different dimensions of existence, especially in a group of comics that place so much emphasis on being a mutant, on being a special person, and then they take her powers away, and she still comes out and she still kicks butt just as much as she did before, proving it's more about determination and character than about a gift of powers.
Jenny?
I wasn't allowed to read comics growing up. My mother and grandmother felt they were anti-quote trash. So the only time I got to read them, I was when they were in the market or the 7-Eleven, and I would stay near the door of the rack and read everything as fast as possible. So the only female character I got was Invisible Girl from Fantastic Four. So I was already like on the Marvel side because that was the only stuff I was really getting to read, that and Batman. And you know, Batman, I think, transcends all the rest of them. You're kind of in whichever side. But then I just stopped being interested, right? I was still interested, but you know, when all you're allowed to read are Archies and Disney comics, it's really easy to leave it behind as you get a little older. And then I cannot remember what triggered it. But I was an adult, and I walked into a comic book shop and went, these all look cool. And I grabbed every X title that was there, and there were a lot, and I started reading them. So that was Storm. And then I realized, they always wanted to act like it was only guys reading it. And every time I went into this particular shop, it would be me and all these other women in business suits going through and grabbing our comics before we were going home. And it's like, well, I think they've modeled this one a little inaccurately. So pretty quickly after that, we were getting every X title. I think there were about 12 by the time. I mean, it was just this ridiculous. I was spending $50 a week on comics and not complaining about it. But I tried other titles, but really the X titles were the ones that really did it for me the most. And part of it was because they had such great diversity. And I also was coming in after the original run. So it wasn't just 5 teenagers fighting the world. These were now adults and people from all over the place and everything else. And Storm always stands out. I mean, she's just an awesome character. So I can't really remember when but she was just something that boom was there, and it made it cool and good and interesting. And again, the diversity in the X titles, especially as they get out of the 60s and into the 70s and 80s, were great. You couldn't find it anywhere. I mean, that was just it. If you wanted to see everybody, you had to read an X title.
Okay. Len, what about you?
Well, actually, the biggest introduction I had, and I just now realized it, was there was an early, well, okay, one of the earliest issues I got was is from one of the more somber, introspective stories. I think it was Life, Death 2, and it was basically Forge and Storm having angst over the fact that, he had invented this gun that took away her powers, except he loves her. And it's interesting that the depth of the character, because there's rage there, but there's also forgiveness there. There's a lot going on. I mean, when I was watching X-Men animated series as a kid, which was my super hook into the X-Men and comics as a whole, when Storm would summon her powers, I would always cringe. But in the comics, there might be a line or two to summon powers or such, but it's usually she ends up being she's actually the biggest moral compass they've got. Because at some point or another, everybody else has gone off the rails, but she hasn't.
Okay. Anybody want to add anything or pick up on anything anyone else said?
Even in my favorite alternate history line is, and I just blanked. It's one where everybody switches. It's not Days of Future Past.
Age of Apocalypse.
Thank you.
Oh gosh, that was so good.
And even in that, she still has the moral center. They don't lose that. A lot of people change a lot in that crossover. But her personality is different, but her moral center is not.
Well, when you've been worshipped as a goddess on Earth, you kind of have to have a moral center.
No, you don't.
You don't.
No, you don't.
Look at
You
Apocalypse.
have to have it. No, you do not.
You do
can't be a despot.
You do if you want to be able to live with yourself. And there are a lot of people who just jettison their humanity.
No, despots live perfectly fine with themselves, and they are perfectly happy. I think it is impressive. I don't think it's a given. I think it's impressive that Storm becomes a goddess and literally stays true to her morality. I think that makes it better.
I would say, she was the first major comic superhero that was African American and female. So she was the first Black woman. And that's very important. And I think that a lot of the qualities that you're stating that she has are idealized. While they are idealized versions of a strong Black woman trope, which is in fact a trope, in a lot of ways, they had to create a character that was that good in order to actually, have her present, when they were introducing her. So kind of like, Uhura on Star Trek, she was really like the first. And so she had to be a pretty pure-hearted character. She didn't have to, but it was a good choice considering the times. And, she was, she's a very well-loved character as well. And I think the first time that I was introduced to her as an adult was actually in the Future Past storyline where she wasn't really, where she was a teacher. A lot of good things can be said about Storm.
What I remember from the early days of reading the comic was, I have a weakness for telepaths, so I'm always going to admire people like Marvel Girl. Emma Frost, no, she's a bad telepath. But one of the things that impressed me about Storm in those early issues was she seemed to have a level of maturity above that of the other characters. And that's not to say they were bratty or childish or anything like that, but Storm just seemed to have a level of composure and a level of understanding that the others hadn't reached yet at that point in their lives. And I'm sort of wondering if maybe and this is not something I've read anything about. So if y'all have, please, I haven't read much about it. If y'all have, please speak up, is that comes from having to make your way through a rough childhood and find your way in the world alone. Does anybody have any thoughts about that?
I do have a thought. My thought is that Rogue also came to the team as someone who had a rough childhood, who was an orphan, who originally started with a life of crime and then got, redeemed after a life of crime. So I think that they had those traits in common, and that Storm was still more mature than Rogue. And Rogue was also treated like as a child. And this does go back to some things that I said about, tropes about people, Black women in particular, that are positive seeming, like the strong Black woman trope, also have other baggage, which is the being seen as a full-fledged adult earlier than someone who is not Black, who's in a similar situation. I do believe that Rogue was younger upon joining the team, so we could actually factor that in. But I think that Storm was also a teen, only a couple of years older. And I do think she was indeed much more mature than Scott and Jean Grey, who were actually dangerously immature at times, I would say.
Even as full-grown adults. Yeah.
I always thought Storm was just smarter. That really, to me, that's where I related with her. I just thought she was smarter and able to, because of that, she's more experienced in a lot of things, coming from her background, and B, she just always seemed super smart to me without having to sit there saying, I'm super smart. And to me, she always came across as more intelligent and actually thinking a few things through. She was always able to do that, even if it was quick, versus some of the others who just literally have to react. Like the difference between Storm and Johnny, our Storm and Johnny Storm, huge. I never, don't even think it, I never do, is totally Johnny Storm. And Storm is always going to think, unless it's in Age of Apocalypse, and then she isn't. But so her center is still there.
Yeah. One thing I like when they play with, is because she is so powerful. She's an omega level mutant. Like, she can terraform a whole planet by herself. She could destroy all life on the planet if she wanted to. So when they do play with this sense of like, she has to keep her power in check or everybody's gonna die. Like, she is just so powerful, and like they'll play with that with Phoenix, but they're like, well, we just got to kill Jean Grey. She can't actually deal with the moral implications of this. We're like, that's fine. We don't need that. But like, Storm is so powerful and has been through so much, and as like growing up as a thief and on the other side of like acceptable society, seeing what happens when power goes unchecked, and then having so much power, I love when they play with that with her. Because it does feel like it elevates it a little bit over the strong Black woman trope of like, yeah, she's strong, but like, she could end all life on this planet. And so you are lucky that she has seen what it looks like over here. Be grateful to your goddess. Like, I like when they lean into that.
Well, they established early on that Storm's powers are also driven by her emotions. So, I'm sure there's a story out there that talks about how she dealt with this, but it's like, if she gets furiously angry at somebody, we're talking, massive storm over a huge area, lightning strikes, typhoon winds type thing, and she learned the discipline to control that. And a lot of what you're seeing with Storm is just always under that control and that discipline. And so much so that by the time that she actually had her powers taken away and she didn't have that need to have control, it was already second nature. And she maintained that discipline.
That just made me think, though, for whatever reason, I didn't think about it when I was talking, but that was brilliant, Doc, because to Sumiko's point, Rogue also has to be really disciplined, because if she touches anybody, she's going to eat them alive. Like, their soul is hers. But she still gets to be more immature. Like, she is more mature than Iceman. But she still gets
Don't
to
you
be.
just, Bobby? He's had it tough.
I love him.
I
He's
love
a
Bobby.
baby. He's a baby. He's a baby.
Rogue has more
in his
impulse
40s.
control.
Yeah.
Problems.
Yeah, but like she's allowed to have that, where like Storm isn't. And so that is, to Sumiko's point, like a really interesting little thing.
Yeah, I mean,
think
Rogue
there's
can do a lot
another
of
angle,
destruction, but Rogue herself cannot destroy the world if she loses her
Just
power.
one at a time. It's fine.
Yeah.
Len, were you going to add something?
Yeah, I was. There's all this talk of the power that someone has, the physicality of mutant ability. But I'm reminded that during the Schism storyline, when Wolverine and Cyclops have finally had enough, they're like, okay, no, we can't live in the same place. You go live over there. We'll go live over here. And, everybody who wanted to go be a teacher and just be a teacher ran off to the school. And everybody who's all these powerhouses are all sitting around, and Cyclops is looking at all of them as like, oh, I got a whole bunch of villains here. And my granddaughter who likes guns. Storm, don't leave. Only it's more he actually comes to her. He makes a very impassioned, private appeal to her. He's like, look, I know my mind. I know what I'm capable of. And I know the kinds of people that are hanging out with me. I'm going to need a moral compass here. Mm. Can it be you? And she said, yeah, I'll stay. You asked, I'll stay.
Well, at one point, she's running blue and he's running gold, or teams. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. And that gave us 2 separate X-Men comics. Thank you. Yes. I kept track of how many I was buying. So you could see how the different teams were operating, which was interesting. I think it was interesting, especially when it was in the big heyday, which teams actually functioned the best. And the ones with Storm and the ones with Nightcrawler were the ones, I think, where your leadership was more of the leadership you want. Where they're trying to keep their people out of trouble while still doing good, versus, any team Wolverine's on is going to go kick ass and do it as fast as they can. And Cyclops is going to spend time arguing with whoever is his second or his third, somebody who has a different viewpoint. That's just going to be an argument over there with the Boy Scout. I'm a Wolverine girl, sorry. The Boy Scout's going to argue
you're
protocol.
Entitled to your wrong opinion.
While everybody dies. But I find Cyclops to be, he's probably one of my least favorite heroes. But
Oh, he's actually one of my most favorite ones. But that actually segues into the next thing that I wanted to talk about, which is, if you had to be on a team led by Cyclops, because everybody, I think still in fandom, he's seen as the leader of the X-Men. If you were going to be on a team led by Cyclops or a team led by Storm, which one would you pick and why? And I think it's Marisa's turn to start.
Storm all day. I mean, I get the appeal of Cyclops. He's not my personal jam. But Storm is thoughtful about the people under her command and what they need. She is responsive, and potentially because she has to keep such a lock on her emotions, she understands that they aren't just, you are a warrior, I'm going to put you right here. But like, you are a warrior and you have feelings, and this might trigger some of your trauma. So let's deal with that before I put you in front of the person who killed you the last 3 times you died, or whatever it is. I would rather be with Storm. Also, if you can choose a goddess or like hardcore eye blasts, I mean, I'm not letting go of it. You choose the goddess.
Doc, what about you?
I'd have to say also that I'd go with Storm. But part of that is just because of all the storylines that have come out about Cyclops. In a lot of ways, he's an asshole. And he had a lot of potential at the beginning, but he's just a real jerk. He's made a lot of mistakes that he's completely unapologetic about. And he definitely needs somebody to keep him in check. And if Storm's not on the team, odds are he doesn't have somebody that'll keep him in check. Storm is much more deliberate and aware of the situation, of her team, and of what's going on. And yeah, I feel a lot safer there.
Okay, Jenny?
I think the best line in the first X-Men movie was, "Hey, it's me. Prove it. You're dead." Okay. Right? Okay. That is Cyclops in a nutshell. I would become the Wolverine and want to be throat punching Cyclops if I was under his command. Oh my God, no. Storm all the way. Cyclops wants to treat everybody like he knows everything, and I'm the boss, so do it my way. But none of these people are actually in the military. This is a volunteer collective, and you don't get volunteers to work with you by ordering them around. And I really do not like Cyclops at all. And the only other check to his balance is Wolverine. So if Wolverine isn't there and Storm's not there, you've got a martinet leading the X-Men, and I'll take Storm. Thank you. I'd go out under Wolverine or Storm before I go under Cyclops.
Okay, Len?
I think it's a difference of, okay, do you need an empathetic leader at the time, or do you need a results-based leader at the time? One of these is not always going to be the right answer. It's not. I mean, there are times where the empathetic leader is the one you want. And if you're after the empathetic leader, then yes, you pick Storm, because the amount of times that you can get from Cyclops of him making an empathetic decision to win a battle, I can count as one. Mm-hmm. And I can quote which one that is. But the rest of the time, Cyclops is very much, I remember during the Utopia era, there was a publicist who was hanging around, and she asked him, she's like, they're fighting the Juggernaut. And he goes, okay, all right, that didn't work, so move on to plan 2. And they're like, well, don't you mean plan B? No. Plan B implies there's only 26 plans.
Sure. Yeah.
Now,
he's much more of a tactician.
Yeah, no, he's absolutely the tactician. If you're trying to win the giant superhero battle, you want to pick Cyclops. If
Do you though? Because yes. I'm going to tell you that Wolverine is going to go in and handle most of it, while Cyclops is assigning people to go, as Marisa said, go fight the guy that's killed you 3 times. Let's mix that up and have you fight somebody else. I don't think he's a great tactician.
I think it becomes a lengthy argument about tactics versus strategy, which we don't have time for in the middle of this panel.
Exactly.
I will say this. I think that Storm became an orphan when both of her parents died in a war that's similar to one that we have going on right now, in fact. And that the fact that she's a war orphan makes her less likely to choose war as an answer. So that is part of why she has the empathy, and also part of why she has the maturity, because her personal particular trauma is related to war. So I think that although people are saying that she's not tactical, I think she's actually more like a seasoned veteran and less like a young person who is running something because of her experience. And I would also say it's kind of like asking people if they prefer, Captain Kirk or Picard, with, Storm obviously being more like Picard. There might be a few, instances where it would be better to have a hothead. But overall, you're probably going to want someone who's more level-headed. So I'm going to say that I do agree that there are situations where you might prefer Cyclops, but I think more often I would go with Storm.
Okay, Len, did you finish what you wanted to say?
I got to the bulk of it. Yeah, we just had,
Okay.
had fun.
Okay. Well, what's your favorite story that involves Storm that is not Days of Future Past? Because we're going to talk about that in a minute. Doc, what's your favorite?
Favorite story that involves Storm.
You can fall back on your favorite moment with Storm if you want.
Actually, I was just thinking is one of my favorite stories of that whole period was of when I was all the New Mutants and all the X-Men ended up in Asgard. And they basically pulled themselves together, and I absolutely love that storyline. And I know that Storm was there, and the X-Men were there, but it was a lot more about the New Mutants. But that's always been one of my favorites. Is that Asgard storyline, and but I can't really pull out any good Storm moments from it.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Jenny, what about you?
I have two. One is Everything in Age of Apocalypse, because her personality, she suddenly is no longer thoughtful. She and Quicksilver are a couple, and she is the one that runs in, and he is no longer a hothead because of things that have happened. So she's the impetuous one, and he's always running after her, but she is still impetuous to save people. So I thought it was an awesome way of showing how different she was in this world, but how she was also essentially still the same. So I loved all of that. And then I really love this moment in the Forge and Storm relationship. It is as they are dissolving, as they're breaking up. Forge is going to take Mystique, who is a mental mess by this time. She can't hold it. She can't hold a body. She can't hold her own body. She's just flipping through, and Forge knows he can fix her, right? But Forge has asked before, this is kind of like his choice. Am I going to stay with the X-Men and marry Storm, or am I going to do this? And she needs to go think about it, right? And Forge basically says, I know what you're going to pick. And you know what? Fine. Mystique needs me, and he takes her off. And the closing panel is Storm, the raindrops are falling because she's very sad. And her statement is, I was going to say yes. And that is just so, to me, that is just so heartbreaking, because she's finally found somebody she's really happy with, they're equals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he misreads, I need to think about it, as a no. When what she wants to do is weigh everything and have those moments, and she comes back and he's made that decision. And it was heartbreaking. I was going to say yes, and that's how that comic ends. And it's just, so I love those two moments in particular.
Len?
Oh, I like from right after Planet Size X-Men 1, when the world finds out that the mutants have said no, we no longer have Mars. We have Ororo, and it's a lively planet that we all can live on. And it'll be the center of the solar system. And of all the things that come out of that, and her portion of it is she has, I think it was in the Sword comic, she has to play the diplomat by having this very tense dinner to defuse Doctor Doom. And he is incredibly upset. All the things that we've done together, granted, they have an interesting chemistry all their own, but he's known for being, super duper ultra smart, and he's just sitting at the opposite end of this table, fuming that it's like, how dare you? And she's just casually, Victor, it's fine. You don't have to be the one who thought of everything. Yeah, I don't remember the exact word, but the entire back and forth over the entire issue when it popped in, it was just, I loved it.
Yeah, she
Hey, it's
reminds him
things
to
like
respect her, and he listens. It's pretty amazing.
yeah, exactly. Yes.
Sumiko, what about you?
Definitely. I'm going to say that I am not the only person who was, before, uh, Chadwick Boseman died, really like thinking and hoping that somehow we were going to see on the screen, Ororo, falling in love and getting married, to T'Challa. And I think that, that would be my favorite, Storm, really. Yeah, and I do hope that we will be able to see that in some form. And I think that, back when she was 12, he rescued her. So I think the little mini series where that happened was, beautiful, and I love that.
Okay. And Marisa, what about you?
Yeah, I was gonna say when she realizes she doesn't have to choose between being an X-Men and the Queen of Wakanda was a pretty awesome run. And the Morlocks. I love that whole storyline. I loved the introduction of the Morlocks. I love that Storm won that duel, like no question. And then I love that she like took over and helped them. I also love the idea of super mutants who were so far on the fringe of society that they didn't even live as part of society. They had their own, and just like again, her ability to bridge those worlds and everything she did as the leader of the Morlocks. Pretty cool story.
Okay. Well, we are actually coming up on time. And there were three things that before we started recording, the panel said that they wanted to be sure that we talked about. Those were Days of Future Past, Storm as Regent of Soul, and Storm's Mohawk. So it's Jenny's turn to start, and she suggested Days of Future Past. So, Jenny, why don't you tell us what you liked about Storm and Days of Future Past, and we'll go around.
I'm going to talk about the animated series, the good one from the early 90s, because I really liked how they handled things. It was different from how it was going in the comics, as it always is. But I really liked it. And in Days of Future Past, what they did in this is that Bishop is flung back and forth against time, and he lands in the wrong universe, and at least what it feels like. And he finds Storm and Wolverine, who are a couple, and they're going on, and it's interesting because they all get flung, and there's something like Storm's reaction of, oh, skin color prejudice, how quaint, right? It's because it's just they're so far back from that. It's like, oh wow, this is what everybody's worried about. How adorbs, not that I can, that he's got claws or lightly, but he's white and I'm black and you're upset. It's so adorable. Right. And Wolverine's ready to like kill everybody for this. Right. And she's just like, and it was just a really cool reiteration. And again, one of the things I really like that they do when we're doing alternates of Storm is that a lot of things change. Who she's in love with changes, who she's doing this and that with changes, but her core essence never changes. Versus like in Age of Apocalypse, Scott is not a nice person, and neither is his brother in that. So you see these complete changes, but Storm does not, her center doesn't change. And it's just Days of Future Past is just really interesting. And I really like what they did in the animated series with it. Comics is good. The movie is good. My favorite on it, though, is of that storyline is animated series.
Okay. Anybody else want to weigh in on Days of Future Past?
I thought that I love Days of Future Past, and one of the reasons that I love it is that is one of the storylines where they most show how the mutants are fighting a battle that a lot of people with disabilities fight just to be in the world. Like all the analogies are there and they're crystal clear. So I really love it in just the series itself in concept for that reason.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay.
I would just say yes, and yes.
Okay. Well, Sumiko, you wanted to talk about the 1980s Mohawk of Storm. You already talked about it a little bit with Teenage Storm. Did you have anything else you wanted to say about it?
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about that. So apparently, this started as like kind of a giggle, like they were just doing it for yeah, and I guess that the artist um had tried to make her look like Mr. T. And so then they ended up running with it. For me, I think that I really was attached to characters like, Jubilee, Jubilation Lee, and other characters that were kind of like, new wavy, cool, like hip characters my age. And this really made me care about that whole group of characters because before that, it was just like kind of like the New Mutants and the younger mutants were all I cared about as a teenager. And those other heroes seemed like they were for old people. So, yeah.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
I love the Mohawk. It made her look so cool. It really, not everybody can carry off a Mohawk, but Storm can. And it just made her look so cool. And I loved it. And they had it in the animated series too at certain points and everything. And I thought it was just this statement of, I am basically the coolest chick you're going to be around. I just loved it.
Anybody else?
Punk rock
Especially
Storm.
how
Go ahead.
high that Mohawk goes.
Oh, I know, right?
I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, do you realize how much product you have to have in there in order to get it to stand up, especially when you're creating Gale Force winds?
Right.
I was going to say it's the perfect like humidity. She can control the humidity. She can control the air pressure. She's got
Right.
like perfect.
Yeah.
Static electricity.
Yes.
Yes, right? Perfect hair.
I love it.
Well,
you
talk about
good.
Mohawk, though. You should look at what she's got now.
Yeah.
It's kind of a combination of every.
It's the faux hawk.
Well, yeah, it's faux hawk. It's got natural curls. There's just a mess of a
Gorgeous.
wonderful movement and flow of hair. It's just like you own it.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's what I was going to say. So I hadn't been reading comics super recently. And this woman that I follow on Instagram was posting about Storm because they're going to bring the Mohawk back for the re-release of the cartoon or the new updated part of the cartoon.
Mhm.
And she's like, that's cool. Fine. But look at this hair though. And it was that faux hawk with the natural curls. And oh my God, it's so beautiful. Like I might read the comics just because of how gorgeous she is. I don't know. But it's amazing. So I love when they play with iconic styles, but update them. So I don't know. That's cool.
I just find it slightly amusing that at the time I was reading those episodes, I was also reading Guardians of the Galaxy, which at that time had Yondu, who was a blue skinned Centauri with a red central vein, as opposed to the movie version where he's got this fin that he's cybernetic fin bolted onto his head. But in those days, it was just, this is what the Centauris looked like, and they had this huge thing, and Storm had the exact same haircut.
Anybody else
constrained by this earth?
Anybody else on the Mohawk before we move on? Okay, Len, you wanted to talk about Storm as Regent of Sol, which is, of course, I guess falls under the Queen umbrella. So why don't you start us off? What did you like about her in that?
Well, I thought it was amazing. It was just fascinating. There were so many notions that come with the concept of the galaxy. And, there's the Marvel universe. They keep talking about the Marvel universe, this and that and the other. And I go, how can you, if Earth is supposed to be important in all this, I don't see how it works, because we don't have a unified Earth. We don't have a unified anything. We don't have a unified humanity at all. Well, Planet-Size X-Men kind of fixed that, at least for a while. They said, okay, the capital planet of the Sol system is the fourth one, and it is now Arakko, because we put the island of Arakko there and terraformed it. It's not Mars anymore. It's Arakko. And we built this giant city in the middle of it. And that will be where all the intergalactical people show up. That's the capital city of the entire Sol system now. And the person in charge of that, let's find the best one possible. And we'll pick you, Storm. You get to be the regent of Sol. And she's like, cool, I'm in charge of everything. You can revoke my command if you want. And no one ever has. Right now, she's in the middle of a civil war on that planet. And Apocalypse has taken Storm's side over his own wife's side because his wife is even more psychotic than he is. And it looks like Apocalypse has made the right bet. I mean, Storm, of course he's made the right bet.
Okay. Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
No, I would just say never bet against Storm.
Yeah.
Well, we actually have a little bit more time left. So one of the things I wanted to ask you to think about is if you were to match Storm up with one other character for a 6-issue miniseries, what character would that be and why? Marisa, what do you think?
I think I would do Storm and Rachel Summers, who had the Phoenix Force. I think just it didn't happen often enough, but anytime we had an episode or an issue where like the women got to hang out and not just like go shopping, it was a fun episode. But like when they got to like actually have real team ups or do things or mentor each other, it was amazing. And I think the just elemental powerhouse of the two of them. Plus they have some common trauma, they have some common successes. I would just love to see them be badass all over the universe. I think that would be
okay. Doc?
I feel like it's kind of a bit of a cop out, but I'd like to see Storm and Nightcrawler. But Nightcrawler back when he was in his swashbuckler phase. I did not like what they did to him when he got religion all over again. But before he was quite a lot of an interesting character, and the fact he's had a few missed teleports that have ended him up in different dimensions gives you a lot of fodder for a 6-issue miniseries.
Okay, Jenny?
Wolverine. Storm and Wolverine were a fantastic couple together. I actually would like them to be romantically together while doing whatever they're doing. They were a great couple. That's if I've got to pick, right? And it can't be me with Wolverine. Then it will be Storm with Wolverine because
Storm and Wolverine, the honeymoon, right?
Oh God, wouldn't that be fucking awesome? Sorry. I would love the heck out of that. Storm and Wolverine on their honeymoon, wherever they are, having to save the day instead of getting to relax, while Wolverine kvetches about this, and Storm, it's like it'll be better once we fix everything.
Okay, Len, what about you?
Well, I mean, Jenny stole my answer.
Sorry.
But aside from stealing my answer, I like the idea. I never even thought about it before, but a while back there was an interview with Nia DaCosta, who directed the Marvels, and she was saying that if she got to do anything, at one point she's like, "Hey, if they would let me do a Storm Cyclops team up movie," I was like, "Okay, just the two of them." So you don't have you have them for a moment, kind of have maybe play leader at each other and like, okay, well, it's just us in the room, so let's start talking. I think that was you remove the team element as just those two. I think that would be interesting. That way you get both tactics, you get all tactics, you get all the strategy, and you get the empathy.
Okay, Sumiko.
Yeah. So I think what could be interesting would be to get the old Storm and Cable like almost romance thing that happened, and then just kind of make it an actual romance.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? That would be a lot of fun to play with.
Well, I asked the question, but I am totally blank on it, so I have no answer. Marisa, were you about to say something else?
I was going to say, I love that 3 of us picked a Summers of some sort, like from a different dimension, a different timeline, whatever. But half of us are like, definitely a Summers. That's where it's where to go.
Well, we actually do have a couple more minutes. So, excuse me, if there's anything else that anybody wants to talk about before we close down, this is the time to bring it up.
I will bring up Age of Apocalypse. I think Age of Apocalypse is the best crossover. The issue with it, though, you have to have read years worth of X-Men before it to get it. Whereas I think Days of Future Past, you don't need it as much. I didn't think the one they followed up with, which again, don't ask me why I'm blanking. I have all of these like memorized where they find the files and how to kill everybody, and Professor X has gone nuts. I don't remember which one.
Onslaught.
Thank you, Onslaught. Onslaught was it was all right, but since it was following up Age of Apocalypse, which was unbelievably iteller, I think that one was less exciting. But again, I just in any iteration, Storm remains one of the best X characters ever. The stuff I don't like all that much is before she comes in. There's a lot of X-Men before she's there, and it's okay, it's fine. But I don't think they hit their actual stride till Storm shows up. Once Storm's there, you get what really feels like a real team, as opposed to 5 people, where Bobby's throwing snowballs and Jean's looking really like she has constipation, and Cyclops is sorry, has to be said. And Cyclops is, glaring. Once Storm shows up, you actually get this full rounded, richer team. So all the stuff before her arrival, it's okay, but it's not nearly as good as when she's there.
Anybody else want to add anything? Well, I thought of a team up while you all were talking. The team up that I would like to see is Storm and Jessica Cruz, but it's Jessica Cruz after she took down Darkseid in Justice League Odyssey, because she came out of that confrontation really powerful. And I think her power ring abilities complementing Storm's massive climatic and weather abilities, they'd be a good team. And Storm is
I didn't realize we could go to DC. Storm and Batman. I mean, if we're going that way, Storm and Batman. He would be the guy that would actually intelligently utilize all of her powers incredibly well, and she would be very pleased that he doesn't kill.
He doesn't kill, and she could pick. I don't think Batman could run over Storm. Batman tries to run over most people.
He wouldn't feel the need because he would respect her intelligence and her.
Well, I think that's a great note to close on. So we'll close there and go around with our usual ending and have you all tell everybody where they can find information about you and your work. And if you have a recent or upcoming release you would like to highlight, this is the time. Len, will you start?
Yeah, len-berry.com is my website, and I should probably give it a revamp pretty soon. Maybe I will. Hopefully I will. As far as upcoming project, I'm working on trying to get another round of my serial, high epic science fiction novel series going. Have that available on Patreon very soon. I'm looking to also start up another serial project, probably through Vela. That one's going to be a little bit more friendly to those with the X-Men mindset, because it's all about biopunk magical girls.
Sumiko?
Yeah. I have a new book coming out called Somnalia, which is the sequel to Happiness and Other Diseases. So that's coming out in Mocha Memoirs Press. And I am also working on releasing a comic of the comic zine series, and they lived long enough to bury their dead, which is kind of like a story about someone who starts to see ghosts and speak to them. So yeah.
Okay. Marisa, what about you?
Yeah. So in January, this cool anthology comes out, and it's my story in it is sci-fi noir. This is all noir stories. And mostly I like to have this next to the desk because look at these badasses that I get to be on a cover with. It's insane. And then in February, my debut solo novel comes out, also from Baen, called Beyond Enemies. So,
okay. Doc?
All right. If you're interested in finding out more about me or my books, just go to your favorite search engine and search for Doc Coleman Steampunk. And that'll help you find my website at doccoleman.com. It'll also help you find my Amazon author page, where you can see all of the various things that I've got in print. And looking forward to 2024, I should be in an anthology called A Cry of Hounds from Eastbeck Books. That should be out in the spring, but maybe a little bit later. And I'm also hoping to get another novel out in print, and that'll be The Kindred of Kali, which will be the sequel to The Perils of Prague. Don't have a date for that yet, but it's in the works.
Okay. Jenny?
My website is GiniKoch.com. I'm all over Facebook, X, Twitter, Blue Sky, Pinterest. I have 3 recent releases. The first is a mosaic novel, post-apocalyptic, in an Old West setting by me writing as A.E. Stanton, called The Dawning of the New West. One is a humor collection of all my humorous science fiction and fantasy short stories and novelettes. The Happy Acres Haunted Hotel for Active Seniors and Other Stories. And the third is a re-release of a collection of paranormal, The Disciple and Other Stories of the Paranormal, with new stories and other stuff by me writing as Gemma Chase. And in February, there will be a re-release of my romantic suspense standalone novel, Plush Life. And in March, the first in a new mystery series coming from me and my co-author, B.B. Bayless, which will be False Girl. So excited about all of those.
Well, very cool. And you can find me at nancynorthcott.com, which will be updated at some point around the first of the year. It's not been updated lately. My next couple of releases are holiday short stories, 2 in my The Light Mage Wars Paranormal Romance series, and a 12th Night story, which was interesting because I started looking for 12th Night customs to write this. It's part of my Merlin Club historical fantasy series. So you can find us all at those places. And I'd like to thank everybody on the panel for participating in this discussion. I had a great time, and I hope y'all did too. And thank you to everyone who's watching. And thank you to our sponsors, Heroes Aren't Hard to Find and Heroes Convention. For more information about them, visit heroesonline.com.